What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're taking a look at the Vero Neuron, and this is the non-flipper version of this knife. The standard version has both a flipper and a front flipper. This one has neither. The intended deployment method is your thumb groove, which is also present on the other one, but that's your main deployment method here. You can use it to flick it open with your thumb or your middle finger, both of which you have plenty of access. It is on ceramic ball bearing, so incredibly smooth action, really easy to deploy. The detent is very nicely dialed in. Now, speaking of the detent, what makes the Neuron distinct amongst the Vero lineup is that this is a non-locking model. It's also not a slip joint. You can see notably no back spring here, and that's because it's being held open or closed when it's in the closed position with a pair of detent balls, one on either side, that keeps it into place. Once you break that detent, it kind of just flows freely between the two positions in open and closed. And so what that means is you get this ultra fidgety knife, a little bit of a learning curve of where to apply pressure on the spine of the knife and how much pressure to apply. But once you figure it out, it closes ultra smoothly, super fast closing and easy deployment, really fun to fidget with. And once you learn it, it's almost hard to fail it. Now, before that, you do have a little bit of a learning curve of where to place that finger. You go too low, it's probably not going to close. You go too high, same thing. If you apply too little pressure, same thing. Too much pressure, and I did it for a little bit there, but then it kind of jumped back into the detent. It sometimes bounces back open if you put too much pressure, but you can develop like a sort of muscle memory where it's really easy to open and close with applying the exact right amount of pressure each time. And so it becomes really easy to deploy it and close it. And so a lot of fun. I don't have a lot of double detents, mainly because I prefer a locking model. And if I get a non-locking model, I prefer a slip joint. And so when I do opt for the double detent, it's usually something where I really like the design. I always love Vero design, so that makes sense here. It's going to be ultra fidgety, and it's usually going to be on the smaller side, which this knife is at 6.3 inches overall. The reason for that is I really just don't think of double detents as heavy use knives. I'd say they're a little bit lighter use than even a slip joint. I think you can use it in most of the same scenarios you'd use a slip joint in, but you do have to be more careful not to put too much pressure on the back of that blade, because you can see just how light amount of pressure it takes to break that detent and have it start closing on your finger. But with that 6.3 inches overall length, we do get a 3.65 inch handle. And so if I stay back behind the tang, I can get 3 fingers on it, but I definitely prefer to get right up behind that blade, right in line with the pivot on this one, and then I can get all 4 fingers around it. But more importantly, it places my thumb right above that pivot onto the tang of the knife. You can see that jimping there, which you don't really feel. It's kind of under the handle, so you don't really feel the jimping, not doing anything in that regard. But I'm pinching that tang, and so if I do lightly bump this blade, my finger is acting as a lock and it's no longer going to close on me, which is why you can still use this the same way you use a slip joint. You just have to be more conscious of your finger placement. Now, if I hit it hard enough, I'm probably not going to be able to hold it from closing on my index finger, but those light bumps, it's not really going to have an issue. With a slip joint, you have a little bit more confidence, especially when you have that stout back spring that keeps it from closing on you, and if you have that half stop where you can stay a little bit behind it, and if it closes to the half stop, you're still completely fine. And so that's why I think of them a little bit more light use than a slip joint, but definitely still a usable knife. I just think it's almost a fidget that can cut more than some other knives where the cutting is the main aspect of it, but definitely a capable knife still. I use these for like opening packages and stuff. I had a double detent that I used for a majority of my package opening for a little while, and so they're still perfectly capable in that regard. Now, on that blade, we have a 2.76 inch sheep's foot blade. I love a sheep's foot, so awesome shape. You can also see we have access to almost the entire length of that. We have a small sharpening choil at the very end, and that grind goes right up into our thumb groove. High flat grind goes all the way up to the swedge as well, but probably about 2.68, I want to say they put the cutting edge at, and so almost full use of that blade, which is great since it is on the shorter side. One thing I really like about these Vero knives also is that it keeps the billboarding to a minimum. You take a look at the blade and the handle from either side, you're not seeing any branding so far, and that's because he has the Vero branding right here on the spine of the knife in front of that jimping. So great place for it, out of sight, but if you are looking for it, it's there. This one is also serialized on the tang of the knife, so also out of the way, number 129. I don't know if that was serialized because this was at Blade Show or if they're all serialized, how many there are, anything anything like that. I do know that it's pretty readily available. I found it on a ton of different websites at the time I'm uploading this video for $305. So I'll make sure to link to one of those in the description, but it does seem to be very readily available. This has titanium handles, also titanium liners, so it keeps the weight down really nicely. Only 2.7 ounces with the pocket clip installed, so great weight to blade length ratio. And I say with the pocket clip installed because, as you'll see, I removed mine and replaced it with the plug. The plug does not come with it. You can buy it separately. I want to say they were only $5. I got it at the show. I asked them for it and they just threw it in for free, so I didn't actually pay for it, but I think if I did, it was only $5. It does, however, come with a very nice pocket clip. A little bit more branding on the pocket clip, so replacing it takes the branding down a notch more, but does have the Vero logo on the pocket clip. But it's a really nice pocket clip. It works really well, great shape on it, slides in and out of the pocket easy. The reason I removed it is when I think of non-locking knives, I just think of them without the pocket clip, so I thought it made sense to take it off, and I put that plug in there. Now, worth noting, this is right hand only, so with that plug it becomes ambidextrous, but you see you can't swap the pocket clip to the other side. And that's because they actually sell a dedicated left-handed model, and so if you're left-handed, you're not left out in the rain, you can just buy the left-handed model. If you get this one, you can go without the pocket clip and it becomes extremely ambidextrous. Just visually, it kind of looks like a right-hand model because the tooling and the plug are on this side, where the other side is non-tooled on the pivot. But overall, really great design. It definitely has that Vero aesthetic. I think if you set this on a table with 100 other knives from other brands, I would immediately be able to pick this one up and say it's a Vero design. And that's a really cool thing. I like the aesthetic. If you don't like the aesthetic, maybe you probably don't like really any of his designs. If you do, you probably like most of his designs. Not that they're all identical, but they definitely have a very similar feel to them. And so really dig that aspect of it. M390 on the steel. Don't remember if I mentioned that, but great steel on these. And just an overall super fun knife. I think it's kind of the perfect size. Like I said, I don't want a giant double detent because I'm not going to use it the same way I would use my larger knives, but this one is a great, light use duty. Same thing, you'd use it for a slip joint. Would love to hear your thoughts on it down in the comments below. A lot of fun once you get that fidget factor down. It technically can. I know I mentioned this is a non-flipper, and I may not be able to do it right now. I'm kind of hit and miss with it because I'm not great with front flippers, but if you take a look, the jimping still wraps all the way around the top of that handle. And so if you can figure out the thumb placement, which again, I'm not really great at this, figure out the thumb placement and where to apply pressure and where to move. Yeah, I'm not getting it here. Where to move, you technically still can front flip it. It's just a little bit harder for me because I'm not great at front flippers. I'm sure the version that has the dedicated front flipper I'd have no problem with, but for me it's just a little bit hard without it. But I have seen people front flip this no problem whatsoever. It's just a matter of knowing exactly where to place your thumb, how much pressure to apply, and where to move it, which I know you just want to kind of slide it across the top of that. But again, would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments below. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, joining the channel as a member. All help the channel out a ton, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.